Hello, everybody. Okay, that's better. Thank you very much. I'm really honored to have the chance to speak at this event. It's actually my third opportunity speaking at this event, so I feel really, really blessed. And as usual, every year I get a tougher question to answer, thanks to Adrian. So today I'm going to be talking about leadership in times of global uncertainty and tech disruption. So I'll say a little bit about where I've come from. So I am a senior advisor at the Tony Blair Institute for Global Change. So we have the word change in our title. So the pressure is real. The Tony Blair Institute, for those of you who are unfamiliar, we are a global organization present in over 30 countries, and we offer policy, strategy, and delivery with a special focus on technology as an enabler. We work closely with political leaders and government leaders in service of bringing their vision for a prosperous and inclusive society to life. So our mission is big, and we deal a lot with uncertainty, and obviously we deal a lot with tech disruption. So this is how I'm going to structure my talk. First of all, I suspect everyone in this room already knows that things are getting more uncertain and more complicated. And the bad news is that the data supports your intuition. But that's good, because I'm also going to challenge us to think a little bit about mapping uncertainty and make us realize that we're sort of not completely victim to it. I'm going to very lightly touch on lots of practical and smart responses because, frankly, there is a ton of literature on this. And I think quite a lot of people in this room are already familiar with them. So what I want to do is, in the brief time that we have together, is I want to focus on two insights from the literature that I've gathered and from the experience that I've had in the work that I do that I don't think we hear about enough. First and foremost, increasing complexity is definitely driving uncertainty, right? And there are some key drivers that we're probably all familiar with. The technology is getting faster, it's more powerful, it's more scalable, there's growing globalization, we're much more connected to each other, we're much more interdependent, and we can see that from some of the graphs here around trade, and also the kind of growth in the rate of change of technology. There's more of us. The rate of the population growth is decreasing, but every year thus far, the human population has increased. And then our access to information has significantly increased. We know more, we can do more, we are subject to greater influences, and we also have the power to influence more people. And all of that means that things become not only more complicated, but they become much more difficult to predict. What I love about doing these talks is it kind of challenges you to go off and do a bit of reading. Because you should be reading, but until you've got a deadline and a bit of homework, it's hard to motivate yourself. And I came across this graph. I don't know if anyone's familiar with it, but there is a World Uncertainty Index, which really impressed me. Has anyone else come across this? Excellent. So a couple of guys already ahead of the curve. So this is really interesting. This is composed by the Economist Intelligence Unit. Their methodology is interesting. Basically what they do is they go through all of their reports, they identify where issues have been described as uncertain, they weight it typically according to GDP, and then they sort of map it. Well, whatever you think of their methodology, I think what's interesting is they say global uncertainty has surged to a record high, and it has increased significantly since 2012. So, now that we're all very clear that the data supports our intuition, the question is, what can we do about it? And I felt inspired by the Economist Intelligence Unit, actually, because I thought, well, if they're trying to map this thing that's really difficult to map, maybe we can have a go at mapping it. So I have made an effort, and I'm going to test it with you, and I'm going to invite you to test it with me. So I'm going to map two things. One is impact. So if there's something uncertain that comes your way, How disrupted are you? Is it an existential threat? And what is the degree of adaptation? And then the second one is, what is the time horizon? Is it sudden? Has it come out of the blue? Or was it quite predictable and maybe you weren't as ready as you should have been? So I'm going to give you a bit of time to read this, okay? So the y-axis is the degree of impact, and the x-axis is how sudden and unpredictable, or kind of what your time horizon is. I've put a few things on there just to give you a flavor. So if you go to the first quadrant, what is slow and unpredictable but is an existential threat? Hopefully, everyone's death of old age, inshallah. And then if you move over to this quadrant, this is where the sudden and very unpredictable things are happening. So some of the things might be sort of crazy weather that impacts your business, terrorist attacks, AI replacing your job, the global pandemic, although there were definitely some people who were making good predictions about that. And then the sort of bottom half is a kind of less interesting space, but as a leader, you kind of want to have an overview. So the slow, predictable, and almost no change, pretty much nothing's going on. And the kind of sudden and unpredictable stuff, I mean, maybe there's crazy weather somewhere that doesn't really affect your life. The truth of the matter is, we are living in the top half, and increasingly, we are living in this quadrant, right? And the implications are huge if we spend more and more of our time in that space. So I had a quick look at the literature. There's a lot of literature on what to do as leaders, and I'm not going to try and cover everything here. But I thought I'd split them into the kind of thinking and being stuff, right? So embrace discomfort, progress, not perfection, keeping the big picture view. There's some interesting literature around like self-compassion and being a bit kind to yourself and to your teammates, not going it alone, adaptive leadership, being open to exit, and there's a lot about listening. The Harvard Business Review has written extensively on this stuff, for those of you interested in terms of where that information came from. Then there's also a lot of stuff around what to do. Knowing your customers deeply, designing for protection or vendor lock-in. So those of you who are big fans of Apple, I think will know what I'm talking about. Thinking about diversifying your portfolio. We know a lot of like global brands are now like offering multiple services. They're dipping in and out of different sectors, replicating what succeeds when possible, planning for shorter time horizons, testing and learning proactively. So we know that a lot of the social media applications do that excellently. There's loads and loads of things you can do. And as I said, I think a lot of people in this room are already familiar with them. So I want to focus on two insights that I derived from the literature, which I really don't think we think about enough. So the first one is, when you operate in a space of uncertainty, luck becomes a much more important factor than you would like. And I think we don't recognize that enough. So there are some important success factors like money and networks and leadership skills, but opportunity, and I'm putting to the power of luck there, is huge. And the reason why it's important to be aware of that is because there are some really important implications for us. The first one is, in an increasingly uncertain world, great leaders can do worse than not so great leaders. And I think that's important to consider when we give credit or when we give challenge, both to ourselves and to others. The second one, and this is a little bit disappointing, resilience matters. And in truth, resilience typically comes in the form of money and networks. And money and networks become so much more important to be able to bounce back, because increasingly we are going to face hits, we are going to face unexpected bad news and challenges, both to our business, to our jobs, to our livelihoods. And the important implication of that is those unlucky enough to be born into less privileged circumstances are probably less likely to succeed in the long run. Now, this has huge implications for us when we think about inequality, when we think about what the situations that you're born into, where countries are beginning. I think a lot of the narrative around leadership for digital disruption kind of disproportionately focuses on the Davids of the world. But the reality is, uncertainty means that Goliath is more likely to succeed. Now, I don't want to leave you with a depressing insight, so I've saved the happier insight for last. And that's the second one, which is, the why matters even more. And there are two reasons for that. One is that if you're going to face a much tougher, more unpredictable path, you've got to dig deep to keep going. You've got to wake up and you've got to feel like you have energy and hope and inspiration. Whether that's you envisage your country becoming a much more developed country, whether that's envisaging a future for your children, whether that's envisaging a better pension so you can quit your job sooner, whatever inspires you, I think the why matters even more. And then the second reason is quite practically, as things change, as your product increasingly faces new competition, and our excellent speaker from Nokia highlighted now that your competition is so much more global than it ever was, it's much harder to sell methods. There's less certainty. People aren't going to bank on your approach being the right approach. And you being able to sell the cause to those who want to fund you, to those who want to work with you, is going to matter much, much more. So I want to leave you with that in terms of thinking about how you lead through disruption, through change, through challenge and uncertainty is, first of all, know your why, know what motivates you, know what you're working towards, and then it's much easier for the rest to follow. Thank you very much.